This is not a news report. What you are about to hear is a speculative story, a what-if scenario about modern warfare at the border. Every weapon, every unit, every piece of technology is real. The events, however, are imagined. At 4:42 in the morning, under a moonless, starless sky, the Sonoran Desert feels more like another world than a stretch of land. A silence so heavy that even the shifting sand seems to wait. Somewhere in this void lies a line invisible to the eye, yet carrying the weight of nations. To most, it is only a border on a map. Tonight, it is about to become a battlefield. That silence is broken, not by coyotes, not by a wandering truck, but by a disciplined formation of engines. Moving through the Sierra El Pinacate Pass is no migrant caravan. It is a convoy of war. At the front, roll-armored command vehicles. Behind them, SUVs bristling with heavy machine guns. 6 refrigerated containers, painted an innocent white, hide 2.7 tons of pure fentanyl, enough poison to erase more than 200 million lives. Escorting the cargo are over 300 fighters, Sinaloa gunmen, Colombian mercenaries, and veterans of special forces. Their rifles are modern, their gear expensive. They carry not only bullets but shoulder-fired missiles and a swarm of kamikaze drones. Among them is Javier, barely 20, clutching his rifle with nervous sweat on his palms. He tells himself this is just another mission, but he knows it is more. They are not smugglers tonight. They are soldiers on a mission of vengeance. 2 weeks earlier, a DEA-led raid with help from a Mexican Army unit had seized 40 tons of precursor chemicals and captured 17 of the cartel's top technicians. Among them was the son of a senior Sinaloa commander. The strike was more than a financial loss. It was betrayal. For years, the cartel had relied on corruption and silence. Now someone inside had whispered to the Americans. For the Sinaloa leadership, this was no longer business. It was war. Their answer, a mission they called Operación Cielo Roto, Operation Torn Sky. The objective was simple and audacious. Cross into U.S. territory, obliterate Border Checkpoint 13 in Arizona, and withdraw before dawn. Strike not just at a rival, but at the United States itself. Was it desperation or a calculated act of terror? The convoy pushes north, convinced that the desert is empty, the border porous. No warning planes overhead, no patrols in sight. To them, America looks unprepared. Javier grips his rifle tighter, steadying his breath. He feels like a hunter. He has no idea he is prey. What he cannot see is the year-long shadow already waiting. Every grain of sand beneath the tires is a sensor. Every canyon hides an observation post. The desert itself has been turned into a killbox. At NORAD's command center, an invisible tripwire snaps. No sirens, no lights, just a single encrypted signal rippling outward. Beneath the dust, among the cliffs and scorched cacti, 3,000 of America's most elite soldiers are already watching. Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Rangers, Marines. They have been waiting, unmoving, for nearly 2 days. This is not a reaction, it is a script written long before the convoy left Culiacan. Javier thinks he is marching into glory. In truth, he is driving into a trap laid a year in advance. And so the question remains, what is the sound of a war that has already been lost before the first shot is fired? 2 weeks before the engines growled in the Sonoran Desert, the balance of power inside the cartel cracked. On July 29, 2025, the DEA, working hand-in-hand with a trusted Mexican Army unit, stormed a warehouse in Culiacan. It was not a raid in the ordinary sense. It was surgical, precise, and devastating. 40 tons of precursor chemicals, the lifeblood of fentanyl production, were seized in a single night. Even more crippling, 17 high-level technicians were taken alive, including the son of a senior Sinaloa commander. The loss cut deeper than money. It was betrayal. For years, the cartel had lived under an unspoken arrangement, bribes paid, eyes averted, intelligence leaked just enough to keep balance. They believed themselves insulated by layers of corrupt officials who sold protection like a commodity. Yet the raid proved that wall of silence had holes. Someone they trusted had fed perfect intelligence to the Americans. In the underworld of Sinaloa, betrayal is not an act to be forgiven. It is a declaration of war. In back rooms and shadowed ranches, the leadership gathered. Rage filled the air like smoke. Some argued for restraint, others for retribution. The decision came hard and final. The United States had to feel the blow, not in Mexico, not in whispers, but in blood and fire across the border itself. Their chosen target was Border Checkpoint 13 in Arizona, a symbol of American control and an artery for cartel logistics. Its destruction would echo from Washington to Mexico City. The operation was christened Cielo Roto, Torn Sky. The name carried both arrogance and fury. The mission was clear: infiltrate U.S. territory, crush the checkpoint, reclaim a transit route through the Gila Mountains, and vanish before sunrise. It was not meant to be a battle of equals. It was meant to be a message. Among the men chosen was Javier, the young gunman who clutched his rifle with nervous pride. He listened as commanders spoke of honor and vengeance, of striking fear into the heart of the gringos. He told himself this was destiny, that he would return to Culiacan a hero. But as he polished the magazine of his rifle, a question gnawed in the back of his mind. Was this truly strength, or was it madness disguised as courage? On August 9th, the order went out: assemble the convoy, prepare the weapons, ready the drones. 3 days later, in the dead of night, Operation Torn Sky began to roll. A storm was coming to the desert, born of rage and betrayal, but guided by arrogance. And like every storm, it carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. The force assembled for Operation Torn Sky was unlike anything the cartel had ever put into the field. This was no ragged band of street gunmen. In secret, the Sinaloa leadership had reshaped its most elite enforcers into a division with a chilling name: Unidad Fantasma, the Ghost Unit. They were trained and equipped not as smugglers, but as a paramilitary strike team, a shadow army meant to blur the line between crime and war. At its head rode Salvador El Inque Carranza, a man whose reputation was carved in blood. With a U.S. bounty of $10 million on his head, Carranza was known for 50 confirmed assassinations and for designing the cartel's distribution web across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. He was both butcher and strategist, and in him the cartel believed they had found the perfect general for their incursion. Carranza handpicked his lieutenants and filled the convoy with the tools of modern war. M4 carbines and PKM machine guns were standard issue, but alongside them came M203 grenade launchers, portable anti-air systems, and crates of rocket-propelled grenades. The unit carried technicians trained in jamming radios and intercepting signals. And most unnerving of all were the small kamikaze drones, silent machines ready to dive onto targets with explosive precision. Javier, the young fighter tucked among the ranks, watched the crates being sealed. He had never seen weapons like this outside of movies. To him, it felt as if the cartel had become a nation, no longer hiding in shadows, but marching into history. Around him, Colombian mercenaries adjusted their gear, veterans hardened in the jungles, men who had fought wars long before he picked up a rifle. Ex-FARC artillerymen spoke in low tones about mortar trajectories. There was discipline here, almost military, and Javier felt both pride and unease. Unidad Fantasma was not only diverse but ruthless, a multinational corporation of violence. It was designed to pierce the border like a spear, fast and lethal, to strike terror into an enemy they imagined was unprepared. But pride can be a dangerous companion. A spear aimed at steel does not pierce, it shatters. As the engines roared to life and the convoy prepared to roll, the Ghost Unit believed they were untouchable. They carried the best weapons money could buy, the most hardened killers the cartel could recruit. Yet in the darkness ahead, the desert waited silently, already seated with eyes, ears, and crosshairs. And Javier, clutching his rifle tighter than ever, could not silence the question rising in his chest. What if the enemy they were about to face had been waiting for them all along? While Salvador Carranza built his Ghost Unit in secrecy, another army was already at work, an army without rifles or uniforms. Inside the U.S. Department of Defense's Border Analytics Data Center, the battlefield was not sand and stone, but data. For more than a year, analysts traced every route Carranza used, every driver on his payroll, every burner phone that flickered briefly to life. Each piece of information fed into a living model of his empire, a ghost map that mirrored his network more accurately than he himself could see. Algorithms flagged the smallest details, a satellite signal handed off too often, a string of prepaid phone credits purchased in suspicious clusters, a driver's route that didn't match his usual pattern. It wasn't one clue they were hunting, but the rhythm of an entire organism. Carranza thought he was moving in shadows. In truth, he was walking under a spotlight invisible to him. The DEA raid that gutted the cartel's supply line was no accident. It was bait. By seizing 40 tons of chemicals and parading captured technicians into custody, U.S. intelligence cut deep and humiliated the Sinaloa leadership. They knew pride would demand a response. Predictive models whispered the likely outcome, a bold counterstrike, not in Mexico, but on American soil. The date and time were uncertain, but the pattern was inevitable. So when the ghost unit finally moved, the trap was not hastily thrown together. Killbox Bravo had been designed months before, mapped across every ridge and valley of the desert. Observation posts were dug in, artillery coordinates fixed, electronic warfare tuned to the enemy's frequencies. For 40 hours, 3,000 soldiers seeped silently into place, becoming part of the landscape itself. The cartel believed they were launching a surprise. In reality, they were walking onto a stage their enemy had scripted. Every step they took was a confirmation, every tire track another line written in a story that had only one ending. And as Javier's convoy rolled deeper into Arizona, he clutched his rifle and tried to shake the unease in his chest, never knowing that his fate had been decided long before his engine roared to life. 2 minutes after the first tire crossed into Arizona, the trap sprang. There was no warning shot, no siren, no shouted command. Death arrived in silence. From 19 kilometers away, a HIMARS battery unleashed 6 guided missiles into the night sky. They traveled at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, invisible streaks that slammed into the second command vehicle. The truck, built to shrug off machine gun fire, disintegrated in a fireball, scattering burning metal and broken bodies across the sand. On the cliffs to the west, SEAL Team 6 snipers squeezed their triggers in perfect unison. Their rounds punched through armored glass and found the foreheads of gunners before they could even aim their weapons. The convoy's lead trucks, once the eyes of the formation, went blind in an instant. Above, 4 Switchblade 600 drones dove with precision. They targeted the mounted machine gun trucks, the only vehicles capable of laying down suppressive fire. One by one, they erupted in violent flashes, each explosion captured in thermal video and streamed back to the command center. Within seconds, the convoy's teeth had been shattered. On the ground, Delta Force operators moved into a flanking maneuver known as Pincer 1. From 600 meters, they fired anti-tank weapons, not at armored vehicles, but at a white container in the middle of the line. Inside was more than 400 kilograms of fentanyl. The blast tore the container apart, releasing a toxic white cloud that swallowed the escorts. Fighters staggered out, choking and blinded, only to be cut down by a pre-programmed mortar barrage raining from the sky. Javier stumbled from his vehicle, ears ringing, lungs burning as the powder clung to his face. Around him, men screamed, weapons forgotten in the chaos. In the span of 3 minutes, the proud ghost unit had been reduced to a broken, burning scatter of bodies and wreckage. He had been told they would be the hunters. Now he realized they had never stood a chance. In just 3 minutes and 25 seconds, Operation Torn Sky was collapsing. The question no one in the convoy could escape was this: how do you fight back against an enemy who is everywhere and nowhere at the same time? The first barrage had torn the convoy apart, but it was only the beginning. As smoke and fire spread across the desert floor, the second phase of the trap revealed itself, silent, invisible, and far more insidious. Deep underground in Tucson, the 75th Digital Warfare Brigade activated a system known as REAPX. Its weapons were not missiles or rifles, but deception, confusion, and control of the electromagnetic spectrum. The convoy's GPS units began to lie. Vehicles that thought they were pushing west to form a defensive line were actually circling east, driving straight into pre-sighted mortar zones. A protection team ordered to retreat ran headlong into a field of claymore mines that had been waiting silently beneath the sand. Every coordinate they trusted had been rewritten. Then their voices betrayed them. Primary radio channels were jammed, while encrypted backups were silently cracked. American operators were not only listening, they were identifying commanders by accent, tone, and word choice. A lieutenant shouting orders into his handset was marked within seconds. Above him, a silent drone painted his position with an invisible laser. Moments later, artillery struck with surgical precision. Every word the cartel spoke became another nail in their coffin. Even the ground itself seemed to listen. AESA radars swept the battlefield for vibrations and frequencies, distinguishing the rumble of truck engines from the rattle of machine gun fire. A trigger pulled in panic became a signal, converted instantly into coordinates, and fed to waiting gunners. Javier tried to follow shouted commands, stumbling toward what he thought was safety. His GPS screen flickered, telling him to move south. But the desert was lying. Each step carried him deeper into a labyrinth crafted by an unseen enemy. He could hear his comrades firing wildly into the darkness, but the bullets found nothing. Above the chaos, he realized the awful truth. They were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting an intelligence that saw them from every angle, predicted every move, and turned their own maps against them. The Ghost Unit had come prepared for a battle of guns. Instead, they had been pulled into a war of ghosts, where every action was anticipated and every escape route already closed. The final blow did not come from rifles or mortars. It came from the sky, so high and silent that the men below never knew they were being watched. Since 3:30 that morning, 4 Phoenix X drones had been circling in wide, patient arcs. They weren't reconnaissance craft patched together from the black market. They were a new breed, radar-absorbent, signal-silent, built in secret by Skunk Works to be invisible predators. Each drone carried 8 precision bombs, and none of them waited for a human hand. Slaved to the battlefield computer, they drew on the flood of data already streaming from radars, sensors, and intercepted voices. The system chose the highest value targets, the trucks with signal jammers, the command vehicles coordinating the retreat, the last containers of fentanyl still intact. When the order came, engage ground priority, the drones obeyed instantly. Their bomb bay doors opened, and one by one the weapons slipped into the night. There was no warning scream, no radar ping. One moment there were vehicles, men shouting into radios, headlights cutting through the dust. The next, white fire and concussive blasts erased them from the desert floor. On the southwest flank, 4 trucks made a desperate dash toward the Gila Mountains. Their GPS units promised escape routes back to Mexico. The drivers gunned the engines, hope flooding through the chaos. But those coordinates were lies, too, false signals projected by American spoofing systems. The trucks barreled straight into a programmed death box, unaware they were already marked. Minutes later, Switchblade drones descended in synchronized dives, tearing the convoy apart with clinical finality. Javier clung to the bed of a truck that never made it. He felt the sudden lurch of false directions, the surge of speed, then the sky itself falling. The blast threw him into the sand. Around him, burning wreckage lit the desert like dawn. In less than 70 seconds, the Ghost Unit's central command and logistics had ceased to exist. The cartel had imagined they were challenging a border force. Instead, they had run headfirst into an invisible blade, wielded by machines too fast and too precise to fight. The thought burned in Javier's mind as he struggled for breath. How can you win a war when the enemy controls not just the battlefield, but the very rules of reality itself? From the haze of smoke and fire, a new shape emerged. It was not the shadow of drones or the flash of missiles, but the slow, deliberate movement of soldiers stepping out from the desert itself. For 40 hours they had waited, buried in rock hollows, dry riverbeds, and forgotten border bunkers. Now, as the Ghost Unit lay broken and blind, they rose as one. Low-noise military vehicles fanned across the terrain, headlights dark, engines muffled. These were not raw recruits. They were the 82nd Airborne, MARSOC, and Delta operators, over 900 elite fighters moving with cold precision. Their mission was not a chaotic firefight, but a sweep, a methodical closure of the trap. The cartel thought retreat still lay open. In truth, the circle had already closed. From 400 meters, sniper fire began to fall like measured rain. No wild bursts, no wasted shots. Each round struck a chest, a skull, a target chosen with patience. Cartel gunmen panicked, spraying bullets into shadows, screaming into radios that no longer answered. Their charge into the United States had crumbled into a last stand of chaos and futility. Thermal imaging from a drone revealed a camouflaged Armadillo command vehicle, hidden in brush, still moving. Inside were 3 senior commanders, men who had ordered bloodshed across 2 nations. Among them was Victor El Lobo Cardenas, the architect of the cartel's distribution network in the American Southwest. The vehicle's wheel was shattered by a drone-guided strike, flipping it into a ditch. Guards scrambled, firing blindly, until a wave of rifle fire cut them down. Within minutes, El Lobo was dragged from the wreckage alive, his encrypted drives seized, maps, routes, and a list of corrupt officials written in cold data. Javier lay on the ground, his rifle lost, ears ringing with the crack of precision fire. Around him, the ghost unit dissolved, not in the blaze of glory he had been promised, but in measured shots and silent sweeps. The desert, vast and uncaring, swallowed their cries. The battle was no longer a clash of armies. It was a harvest, careful and deliberate. For the United States, victory was not just measured in the bodies left behind, but in the intelligence pulled from the wreckage. For the cartel, the war they had imagined would make them legends had instead reduced them to ashes scattered in the sand. By 6:15 a.m., the desert was still again. The gunfire had faded, the engines silenced, leaving only the crackle of burning tires and the low whistle of wind across twisted metal. In just 93 minutes, the ghost unit had ceased to exist. Over 300 fighters, 46 vehicles, 6 containers of fentanyl, erased without a single American casualty. There were no press conferences, no banners raised in triumph. At 8 o'clock, the Pentagon issued a sterile line to the public. A border security incident had been resolved. Yet on social media, the story told itself. Grainy images surfaced, columns of black smoke rising behind Border Checkpoint 13, the carcasses of armored trucks strewn like bones across the sand. One image spread faster than the rest. A U.S. soldier knelt beside a wounded gunman, a boy no older than 17, his face burned, his hand still wrapped around a bent AK-47. The soldier wasn't aiming his rifle. He was offering his canteen, pressing water to cracked lips. In a night ruled by drones, missiles, and invisible algorithms, that single act of mercy carried further than any weapon. For the men who planned Killbox Bravo, victory was measured in precision and control. But for the world watching, the silent message was heavier. America did not need to shout. It could wait, it could listen, and when the moment came, it could strike with a speed and certainty that left no doubt. Javier, coughing in the dust, saw none of this. He lay among the wreckage, stunned by the scale of the destruction, the futility of the fight. For him and for the cartel, the lesson was carved into the desert floor. Power is not in the loudness of the attack, but in the silence that follows it. Operation Torn Sky was over. Operation Killbox Bravo had just redrawn the lines of modern war. The question that lingered was not how the cartel had been defeated, but how the world's criminals and the nations that sheltered them would adapt now that they had seen what America could do in less than the span of a movie. The victory in the Sonoran Desert was not won in 93 minutes. It was earned in the year before the first shot, in the hum of servers and the glow of computer screens where analysts built a mirror of the cartel's empire. Every route, every phone call, every signal was traced and logged until Salvador Carranza's network was laid bare like an open book. The true weapon was not the HIMARS missile or the sniper's bullet, but the algorithm that knew his patterns better than he did. On the ground, Rangers, SEALs, and Delta operators executed with flawless precision, but their perfection was the final link in a chain already forged. They were the blade. Intelligence was the hand that guided it. The Ghost Unit had marched prepared for a fight against men, but what they faced instead was a system, omniscient, patient, invisible, that had already scripted their defeat. Javier saw only fragments, the explosions, the drones, the silent sweep that cut down his comrades. He would never understand that the battle was over before he left Culiacan. For him, it was chaos. For the Americans, it was confirmation of a prediction. When the dust settled, the question that lingered was not about tactics or weapons, but about the future. If a nation can anticipate and neutralize threats with such precision, where is the line between defense and preemption? Victory on the battlefield was undeniable, yet the image that endured was not missiles striking targets, but a soldier offering water to a wounded boy. It suggested that even within the most advanced machinery of war, there remains a core of human dignity. The desert fell silent again, but the silence carried meaning. It was not just the end of one battle, it was a warning to every adversary watching. America had shown it could wait, watch, and strike with unrelenting certainty. But beneath the digital ghost that hovered over the battlefield, the human heart still whispered a question. What is the true purpose of such overwhelming power, if not to preserve the very humanity it could so easily erase?